live, I think, eventually. Yes, we are live. And we're back for another round of podcasting. It is me, your host, Deadpool Speaks, and you're listening to Chimichanga Talks Wrestlefest. And here with me today, the man of the hour, the bearded flower, the absolute wonderful person that I cannot see right now because he's wearing a camouflage shirt. So it's only arms and a floating head. Absolutely frightening. It is Rody Batman.
What's up, guys?
Oh, jeez. Okay. Man, you're just like Dr. Evilbeard. You take a long moment to just let it sink in, right? It's like we're here, we're flowing.
Dramatic pause. You always gotta do dramatic pause.
Dramatic pause my ass.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it is. Okay, all right. So we're here today, and we're trying something new because we obviously started the Chimichanga Talk Wrestlefest page. It is something that we are doing because we're hoping to eventually create a very cool event for our local town. But before that time, I mean, me and Rody Batman and many of our listeners out there are big wrestling fans, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dramatic pause for dramatic effect. And you know what I realized? Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and do something magical right now, real quick.
Does it involve unicorns?
Yeah, it does. It does. Believe it or not.
Speaking of Kayfabe.
Yes, actually, and that's exactly. Hold on a second. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about today on Chimichanga Talks Wrestlefest. We're going to be talking about Kayfabe, right? Do you call it Kayfabe?
Absolutely.
Do you call it Kayfab? I heard you call it Kayfab.
Kayfabe.
Okay, because
Kayfabe.
Yeah, that's what they call it in Europe. Kayfabe. So, we have a lot of interesting things that we want to talk about. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about why wrestling has gone so bad. A lot of people look at the golden age of wrestling. And some people say, well, the golden age of wrestling was the Attitude Era. Some people say it was the 70s and 80s. You're talking about the WWF days. AWA, just that kind. What to you, Rody Batman, is kind of the defining era of wrestling?
Well, for me, I did love the 80s wrestling, but I grew up with the Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars. That's when I really got heavy into wrestling.
And most of our listeners do. I mean, most of our listeners come from that time. And the landscape has changed tremendously. And I think that's part of some of the discussion that we're going to be having. First of all, just last week, start of the year, we already lost a great legend. We lost Mean Gene Okerlund. And yeah, go ahead. You said
so sad.
Yeah, it
I think I shed a tear when I woke up and actually read that on Facebook.
I mean, it is absolutely amazing how this man had changed. He was a baritone. Just an absolutely amazing sounding man. And the best part about it is that he made everybody that he interviewed look good. Even Sid Vicious.
That was a feat in of itself.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people come out, via the different social medias, whether it's Twitter or on Facebook or through podcasts, and just an admiration of Mean Gene. Because I think that even though Mean Gene did kind of switch around a lot, he went wherever the money was good. He wasn't like an Undertaker.
But did like everybody else in wrestling.
Yeah. Hey, you follow the money, and there's no shame in that. And you hear stories about Mean Gene being like an extreme workhorse. The man was dedicated to his job up until just recently. I mean, he was doing tours. The last I think that he did was around Thanksgiving time. And I mean, to be at that age, just still pushing it, showing up to conventions. We do conventions all the time, and it's exhausting.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're not young spring chickens by any sense of the word. I don't know, maybe.
Well, I'm closer than you are.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. But yeah, no, it was absolutely tragic. And the thing is, Mean Gene came from an era like with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan and other great wrestlers that we've lost over the last couple of years, where kayfabe was very huge. Now, for our listeners and our watchers who have never seen or know what kayfabe is, do you want to try to explain it for them?
For the most part, it's just the the idea that wrestling is real. Nowadays everybody knows that, there's a lot of work that's put into one match, not like every match that, but just one match for the night, They spend probably hours just going over, what they want to do in that match. But back in the day, the kayfabe that you're referring to is, nobody knew about that. Everybody thought that, it was just like a boxing match or, some other type of fight that, they went into it and, built it up and, everybody loved the hype, Exactly. Nowadays, the hype is built in different ways, but, I think they still do a good job to some extent, but you don't have that feeling like you go into a match and, oh my God, here comes Hulk Hogan or Randy Savage, and it's like, oh my God, I got goosebumps, now it's not like that anymore.
And I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, when you look at wrestling back in the day, it was so protected. Basically, if you were let into the business sense, you learned about marks, which are kind of like the audience, the ones that kind of fall into it, right? It was like a magic act, They went ahead and used misdirection. They used all these other things to try to go ahead and protect it. And back in the day, heels, which is like the bad guys, and I'm doing all this because, I expect you guys to kind of really understand that you're wrestling fans, but any casual listener can go ahead and kind of figure out towards the end of this exactly what we're talking about. So heels are the bad guys, faces or baby faces are the good guys. So those two did not match. So heels rode in cars with heels from town to town. Baby faces, same thing.
You never saw them in the grocery store, buying bread with one another. They stayed separated. You never saw them talking.
Yeah, they would be booked on different rooms, like in hotels. They would be booked on different floors.
Had their own locker rooms and everything.
Mm-hmm. It was that protected. And one thing that you have to remember is that back in the day, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have anything. So basically, your Monday Night Raw was you waiting for these wrestling promotions to come into your town, and that's the first time you learned about who's facing who. And they would play these storylines out, so basically, let's say they're doing a tour of Florida, Tampa would get the same story that Tallahassee would, and so on and so forth. They would just kind of bounce around until it was back, to do the tour again. So a lot of these wrestlers were facing themselves, night after night and different things. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say sorry about the background noise.
No, it's fine. So one of the first kind of exposures of kayfabe, but one of the first times that it really kind of dropped, and it was actually a really funny story. Do you know about this? It's the Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Oh no, I hadn't heard about that one.
Yeah, they're famously cheap. In a sense, and they were riding together. They just really got along. And the thing is back in the day, it was a different lifestyle. You can only imagine having to work these things day in and day out. The drug use was very heavy because you got to remember these guys would take all sorts of punishment. If you did not show up for work, if you did not go ahead and show up for your match, you would not get paid. So it was Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Jim Duggan that were riding in a car together. I believe it was that they were intoxicated. They were pulled over by the police, which at the time was like, a big no-no to go riding together. And not only that, but they were discovered that they had some drugs on them. So they wound up going to jail. And the thing is, this kind of made a lot of news headlines. So a lot of people were like, wait, what are you talking about? The Iron Sheik, who at the time was, in a kayfabe storyline with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Every night, coming down the line, with a waving the American flag and stuff like that, and then suddenly both of them are busted with copious amounts of drugs and having a good time riding along on the road. So they actually both got temporarily fired for it because this was a big deal.
I can imagine just just like you said, you don't ever see him in the same location at one point. So, to all of a sudden there goes the wool, and everybody sees him like, oh, we're hanging out in the car. We're carpooling together. We're sharing snacks,
Yeah. Like we're sharing cocaine. It's okay. It's absolutely friendly. So that was
sugar.
Yeah, there you go. It was a different time, people. All right, everybody in the '80s did coke. Shut up, even Big Bird. So back in the days, you didn't have that kind of exposure. You tried to stay low, and I mean, wrestling wasn't as big. I mean, wrestling was huge in the South. It's always been huge in the South. That's the one thing. I mean, you'd have. Of course, like the New York territories, all these things would be broken into territories. But the Southern Territory, holy smokes! And it's because us, and this is why Rhodey Batman is wearing the camouflage. It's because us good old boys, we like that kind of good old fashioned wrestling, right? We call it soap opera for men, and that's exactly what it is.
Oh yeah, I always referred to it as soap opera for men. It's like you mix the sports and the drama together, and actually, you can I'm going to watch my stories.
Yeah,
we watch my stories.
We're going to watch my stories and deal with it. But the thing is, instead of dealing it with slaps and everything else, I mean, we do deal with it with slaps, but just ultra violence is good.
Well, I'm telling you, and like you're talking about the Kayfabe, and
Fabe.
Even in Fabe. Sorry, Fabe. There's an E on the end. It's silent.
We're not in Europe.
But even in the olden days, like we're talking about preparing for matches or whatnot, I don't know necessarily that they do it too much now today. People still take bumps, but back in the day, if you didn't even respect the person that you're wrestling, you got knocked out.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what's that? I mean, to the point where it's like, okay, that was real. You might not think it was real, but like he just got knocked the hell out.
He got potatoed. There's a phrase for it. It's getting potatoed means when instead of pulling your punch, you actually go home run and full pull it on. Harley Race. Harley Race was famous for this. He, especially any of these green wrestlers, and by green I mean they're locals that are working dark matches that are trying to kind of get into the business. So a lot of these companies will come in and hire these to kind of just squash matches, so that way.
Yeah, they'll do whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And boy, if you mess up once, man, I'm telling you, some of the stories that they produce.
I always heard Goldberg was real stiff, and of course he had his winning streak in the WCW era. And it's like all these little pencil geek type, real thin guys, and they're just getting leveled and bent in half, and it was just crazy to watch. And it's like, how you can't pay me enough to take a stiff spear from anybody, let alone somebody like Goldberg.
Oh no, and I mean it's real. I mean, like when they take chops, like One Job. So for some of you that follow Chimichanga Talk know who One Job is. One Job is my son, and we're both really huge wrestlers and wrestling fans. And One Job, he met Jake the Snake Roberts when he was about 10 years old. It was the first picture we took, and he was just so impressed with Jake the Snake Roberts. He grew up watching the things. And then we had the opportunity to meet the Jake the Snake Roberts again. Was about 2 years ago, and the one thing that he wanted more than anything else was to be chopped by Jake the Snake Roberts. Right after it happened, which it boomed across this, because it was at a convention. It boomed across this room. It was just like, whoa! My son's eyes opened up so big, and I think some organs came out his ass. And then
all the capillaries were like shredded in his chest.
His heart went, what the fuck? Just because, I mean, some of these people were famous for these chops. Ric Flair, and there's no way to fake a chop. I mean, this is just straight off on the chest.
It's all about the sound when it comes to it anyways. I mean, you had Nature Boy always did his knife edge chops and whatnot, but they were like that's why they called him knife edge, because he was just kind of clipping you on the it was more of a chop than it was like a slap. But I mean, you like Big Show, he's got a hand the size of a freaking saucepan. Yeah. Or actually probably more like a frying pan. So to get hit in the chest, and then he started that whole gimmick of, shushing the crowd.
So they could hear
it. Everybody gets quiet, and then he hits, it doesn't matter who it was, he hit him so hard that, like, the guy in the back that can't even see Big Show, he's so far away, is cringing and crying because it hurt so bad.
Oh, yeah. No, he knocked over, like, 2 or 3 people in the first row just from the impact of the wind.
The sun chop!
Wow. Now, the one thing, and this is why it went on as far as it did, is there was famously, I think it was an episode of it was a news broadcast. It was Geraldo Rivera was there, and he was like, this isn't real, da da da, and this guy just beat the crap out of Geraldo Rivera, which kind of just goes to show. I mean, he should have known. This was in the 80s. He should have known that this was the direction his life was heading very early on, when he got that famous beatdown, because they were trying to protect kayfabe so much that they would beat down somebody else who thought. And the thing is, like Harley Race and people like that, these heels, they had to. And if you look at some of the old footage, which is great that the WWE network is showing a lot of this AWA old footage and stuff like that, you see the wrestlers being walked down to the ring by security, and this is not like fake security. These are policemen that they hire. Okay, and the reason they had to hire them is because these heels would be threatened, spit upon. I mean, it was so real that they had to be walked out and run out of the arena.
Well, some of them, like the Iron Sheik, they built these personas based off of real live hate. Oh, yeah. So, everybody hated Iran, so like, let's make him the Iron Sheik. Everybody will really hate him. Like, not, I'm trying to remember, it was, I think the early 2000s, was Hassan? Trying to remember what his name. He was like
Ahmed
a spit.
It lasted like a week before they pulled it off because of offensive nature.
Yeah, it was like bad timing, I mean, he was the next Iron Sheik, and if it wasn't for what happened, he would have been a heel for a very, very long time, just because they build off of real life hate. And I mean, as much as I hate it, it's what builds a good heel. I've seen guys like Big Boss Man, and he played that role where he went out, and actually it was Big Show's dad, I think.
Yeah, that was famous. And he ran off with a casket during the funeral.
That's nuts.
Well, and
like, this
funny.
Is a little over the top, but I'm like, okay, you're kind of making him a pretty good heel, but it still didn't work.
No, but I mean, it's funny that you mentioned this, because it's like that's how seriously a lot of these people took this. Is that when for example, the Midnight Express that worked with Jim Cornette, and Jim Cornette has such amazing stories. You can check out the Cult of Cornette and stuff like that on his podcast as well. But he tells some of these most amazing stories of where they had to, especially after like a massive, pulling massive heat. And what that means is that when there are, when you're trying to get the audience angry with you, when you're an ultimate heel and you cheat to like steal a belt or something like that, and people just boo you out of the building, that is generating heat. So this massive heat that these guys would pull, they would actually be told by the police, hey, you need to get out of here. I cannot control these masses because they are going to be coming after you. Like Harley Race, I think, was stabbed like 17 times. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, it wasn't safe for a lot of these guys. These guys knew, when they played these heel characters, they knew what they were getting into. They knew how dangerous it was. And some of them would, swear by it. It's like, that's how hardcore and tough these guys were. Even though they weren't like that in real life, they had to complete this persona.
It was their livelihood. I mean, they couldn't break the persona because, they could, basically throw their whole life out the window, because back in the day, that's why it was such a big deal when Hogan swapped, because back in the day, you were a heel, you were a good guy, you were a good guy. It never really swapped that often, and if it did, it was usually the in-betweeners that they could go one way or the other. It just depends on who liked them, but you didn't jump ship very often. So I mean, you had to keep that persona, otherwise you're throwing your career out the window.
Exactly. And I mean, basically what they would do is they would go ahead and a lot of these territories, what they would do is they would go ahead and swap a lot of wrestlers out just to kind of give them a little bit of breathing room, let kind of some of the heat sometimes die down because it would grow so intense. But I mean, that's kind of what you wanted. That's what filled seats. That's what got asses in seats. Basically, being able to be that angry that you want to come back and boo this guy. You want to make sure that they get their comeuppance. And that was huge. And little by little, and this is where, we go ahead and kind of look at what happened and what went wrong. Little by little, as, the marks became more and more educated. And remember, the marks are the people in the crowd, the people that don't know, that believe that this is real. They became more and more educated with the internet and all these leaks and things like that. Basically, people started to see behind the veil. I think that Vince very early on started to see that. That's like kind of where the 80s hit. Suddenly there was a shift. So you had a lot of people that were absolutely 100% dedicated to the wrestling thing and absolutely loved it and adored WCW because they never kind of went super gimmicky. And then you had the WWF, which at the time decided to kind of shift gears. And suddenly you had all these weird characters.
What was it? The gobbledygook?
Yeah, gobbledygook. The Goon.
Yeah.
You had Duke the Dumpster DeRossi. You had Nails. So you had these people that were coming out of the woodwork in on the WWE side. It was more geared for kids. I mean, Vince kind of saw the future of this as entertainment and as marketing and being able to sell toys. And little by little, we all remember like the what they call the rock and roll era of wrestling, when you had these Saturday morning cartoons. You remember those?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So being a heel and being a face, it just meant how you would market your stuff and to whom. Usually, the baby faces were marketed more towards kids, while the heels were more supported by the adults, just because they like to see that. Rowdy Piper was very famous for kind of being on both ends of that spectrum. And I mean, you had all these fantastic characters, and little by little, you started to kind of see kind of the cracks in kayfabe. Because, I mean, you don't believe, hey, look, here comes this ex-convict who's coming after the big boss man who put him in jail. The storyline's got...
the Repo Man.
Yeah, the Repo Man, right? Doink the Clown. You started seeing, like, it went from being, hey, we are watching, Days of Our Lives, to suddenly we're watching a Spanish soap opera in English. It went just real crazy.
What was the guy's name that fell through the wall? The Shocker?
The Shockmaster.
Yeah, the Shock.
Our friend Fred, the Tugboat. You may know him as Tugboat, or you may know him as Typhoon. Fred Ottoman, great guy. Absolutely, he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. A guy kept all of his memorabilia. His wife Sheila absolutely hates that. He has a hat for every event he went to. He wrote the date on it. It's fantastic. He's like a wrestling hoarder for himself. And I hope he's doing well. I haven't seen any updates on him as of recent, but he's had some bouts with diabetes and things like that. But I hope he's doing well. Fred Shockmaster was supposed to be part of a mystery team. And they had given him a glitter stormtrooper helmet, which he still has, by the way. And he was supposed to accompany Sting and a couple other people to the ring against Lex Luger and his team. And when his cue came in, the thing is, the guy who built the wall that he was supposed to crash through couldn't find like certain breakable materials. So what wound up happening is he built the wall, but he put like a frame around it. So it's not necessarily like a door where like it's completely exposed, but like he had to kind of like jump through because there was a beam, a 2x4 beam right underneath like where you normally walk through. So
sure.
he had to make this thing kind of count. And the thing is, he could barely see because the glitter was covering it so much. I think it was Ole Anderson. Right, one of the famous Anderson brothers, there's Arn, and then there's Ole Anderson. Ole Anderson played the voice of Shockmaster because he couldn't even talk. through this thing. I mean, so basically, poor Fred was just a stooge, and he crashed through the frickin' wall, tumbled in. He had to put his helmet back on, and even after that, I mean, they had to hold the laughter. Like the wrestlers were trying so hard not to laugh. Even Ole in the background doing the voice, trying so hard not to laugh because it was just absolutely crazy. And like I said, you know, these are the cracks that started to show everywhere. These are the things that people started seeing, and then came the Attitude Era, which is I think that was one of the eras that you told me that you want to kind of really fallen for it as far as
absolutely. I mean that was always, I mean that the Attitude Era is what kept me a WWF fan, you know, but I always watched more of the WCW side of it just because of the certain wrestlers that were in there. I love the whole NWO thing. You know, Sting was like one of my all-time favorites, you know, even with, you know, the Crow gimmick and so on and so forth. So, but the Attitude Era, just, you know, the personas and the egos that were going through there, you know, building from the 80s to the 90s and the transition, it was so cool to watch. And, you know, just the different wrestlers that would step up. And, you know, you have that nowadays. It's just not necessarily, it's not much, I don't know, it's not as epic nowadays, is it? Because you watch them, it's almost like you watch them from a baby, you know. You got the NXTs and you got the indies and, you know, everything's on the internet now. So, you know, you see them before you actually see them in the big time. So, I mean, it's, you don't have that shock factor of when, you know, all of a sudden somebody's here, you know. It's just like when Brock Lesnar first showed up. I mean, that was kind of post, I guess that was kind of Attitude Era, but like when Brock...
Yeah, he was part of, what is it, OVW, I think it was, back in the day, and he was taking on, like, Batista and stuff like that. He was harnessing his skills, so there was a section of the world that knew who Brock Lesnar was, and a large section that didn't.
Yeah, so, I mean, when he first showed up, it's like, oh, I know Paul Heyman, but I was like, who's this freaking beast? And, you know, he's just, like, leveling everything, and it was like Goldberg all over again, you know, so, but they did it differently, obviously, and Brock Lesnar's still huge now, but, I mean,
but just back in the day, it was, I mean, he would do an F5, and you were like, I mean, you were just shocked, because he picked up some of the biggest men, and I think that's what it is I think it's shock value more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And you know, this is where kind of kayfabe started to go ahead and trend downhill, because it was exactly what you mentioned. I mean, a lot of wrestlers, what they would do is they would kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, because he started to realize that you know, for shock value and for everything else, it would blur the lines a little bit more. So, you know, you would have them use their real names. You know, because a lot of the fans already knew that, you know, oh, you know, he wasn't The Rock. He was, you know, Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
So occasionally, you know, Triple H would say, well, I think you're full of yourself, Dwayne. And fans go, oh.
Yeah, fourth wall break. Oh, my God.
There
almost.
You go.
Yeah.
So kayfabe went from, hey, we are absolutely doing the storyline we're kind of pushing through, to breaking the barrier of what is fake and what is real.
And I'll be honest with you. I mean, we're, you know, with the subject that we're talking about, you know, I see them almost trying to get back to it in a small way. And I don't know how much, I'm pretty sure you follow a lot of like the Twitter wars and stuff like that. So, you know, they went from, it's just like when, Dolph Ziggler first started doing the whole Twitter stuff, you know, he even his call sign, it's Heel Ziggler, you know, because he was the bad guy at the time. So I mean, he started doing all these little Twitter wars, and then everybody else, you know, I'm pretty sure they were doing it before, but you know, everybody else started doing the same thing, but they were being themselves. You know, they were showing pictures of themselves with all the other wrestlers and the divas, and you know, hanging out with one another and shooting the shit, and then. Now, if you watch it, it's almost like everybody's Twitter page is its own promo. So they're trying to almost mask it, even though they're sharing pictures of them hanging out with one another. You know, you've got you've got a match that's coming up, and next thing you know, you're looking at Twitter and they've got pictures on there, and or Instagram or whatever, and they got
Yes.
pictures of each other with their opponents and whatnot. But they're still having their little Twitter wars, like they're in character and whatnot. So it's like, I can't even take you seriously. But it's like they're trying to do it without actually doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I think that's part of what I call kind of the shift of kayfabe. Because, like I said, a lot of these wrestlers, and CM Punk was famous for this as well. I mean, he had that massive pipe bomb that a lot of people, still talk about. And the reason it was such a big deal is because, a lot of people say, well, the wrestling, the writing hasn't been as good as it was before. The storylines were a lot better, but I don't necessarily think that's what it is. I think what wound up happening is we did not want to believe the storylines. Because the storylines were always there. It was always kind of like, hey, here's the good guy trying to do everything that he can, and here's the heel that's stopping him at every turn. And you were invested, right? So back in the day, there was... please be wearing pants. Okay, good. Back in the day, it was just all about that. It was about the fact that we were... invested in this story. We went ahead and wanted to tune in every day to kind of see how it built up, how everything went through. So I think that's what was great about the Attitude Era, is that we still kind of believed. Kayfabe still did kind of exist, but we were invested in the wrestlers and the way that they kind of went through. Nowadays, the storylines, yes, they become less believable. Yes, there are less full of them, but it went from having quality stories and great matches to having big bumps with instant gratification. I think they thought, well, nobody's going to stick around for a 1-year feud. No one's going to believe that these guys are going to be wrestling night after night and doing all this other stuff and then meeting up at these pay-per-views and you're constantly seeing, that kind of downfall. Like I think the last great one was probably Samoa Joe and AJ Styles.
Yeah,
where they carried that in for quite a while, and it was building and building and building.
Well, they've kind of been doing it a lot with AJ Styles, because they did it with him and Shinsuke before then. I mean, they had like 4 months worth, at least, of pay-per-view events, and everything in between. So I mean, they tried to. I mean, and then they've even gone back to wrestlers holding on to those titles for much longer. Back in the day, it wouldn't be surprised to have a wrestler or even a women's champion hold it for years. And now it's like if you hold it for a month, you're doing good. And to see AJ Styles hold it for over a year.
That was fantastic, because I think it gives credibility to what you're doing. I mean, and I think that's where a lot of the fans nowadays are. Like, you see the fan base for the WWE, and you have some fans that never want to lose hope. The same fans that are Red Sox fans, or is it Red Sox that always are constantly? I don't know. Go Sports. I'm not. Yeah. I'm trying here.
Red Sox, Yankees, Cubbies. They're all holding on hope.
You cry, or better yet, I know this one because my parents are football fans. So being a Dolphins fan. Yeah, exactly. Just when they get your hopes up, they suddenly just fall off the bandwagon. They don't just fall off the bandwagon. They scream and grab on and hold on, and then they get caught underneath the wheels and dragged out. But I think that's the older generation of the WWE fans nowadays, because they're if you look at their toys and everything else, I mean, they're all geared for kids. Everything that they try to do is trying to be a little bit more friendly. It's the PG area, like they're calling it. But then what you have is people like New Japan. You have Impact is actually making a change now. That was TNA. Everybody is kind of leaning back towards, hey, let's build these really good stories. NXT. This is why a lot of WWE fans are so heavy on NXT, because, and that's run by, Triple H, as opposed to how the WWE is kind of mainly spearheaded still by McMahon. Triple H sees the value of young talent and sees the value of building a really good story. And I think, it's one of the things that Jim Cornette said it best, and I always kind of reference him because, I mean, he's got such a big mouth, and he loves to talk about, he hates flippy shit, which is kind of like what New Japan does and all this other stuff. But I think that one of the most important things that you have to remember about making a really, really good and watchable wrestling promotion is being able to stick to a solid story and being able to create a heel that can actually generate heat from the public. I think that there's a lot of things that we can't do anymore, and they're seeing that, but not being able to push the boundaries of what we can show. Because I think one of the last great ones that was like that was probably Sergeant Slaughter and Hulk Hogan, when Sergeant Slaughter flipped.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, there were people threatening to kill him and, he had to go ahead and get additional security from the WWE. They sat down with him and said, this is going to get really heated, but if we do this right, it's going to be amazing. And it was. It was fantastic. And I think if you look at, like, Ciampa, right? Tommaso, and if you look at his heel run, that he had, if you look at the NXT guys, how they play the heel role, I can't remember the name of this girl. Oh my god, I always forget. This girl on NXT, that she was an MMA fighter. She had the belt for a while, and she lost it, and now she's on the course to get it back. And what she constantly does is she hurts all her opponents on purpose, like, quote unquote on purpose, And then even after the refs come out and, like, you have the EMT staff come out and look at the people, she continues to beat the ever-living hell out of them. And then, she doesn't care about the audience. She doesn't care about anything. All she cares about one thing is winning. And then she'll look down on everybody else and trash them completely. That's a good heel. A good heel will be able to look at everybody and call them idiots. And, this is what Ciampa
It's not. It doesn't feel like a cheap pop. It's makes it believable.
You see, that's one thing that, like, if you look at a lot of the great heels, right? Even if they played coward heels on their promos, they were always trashing the audience. That's what you got to do. I mean, you have to have that emotional investment, and a lot of wrestlers don't do that. A lot of wrestlers don't care.
See, and I don't know. Now I'm going to switch it from the wrestler to the women's wrestler side of it. Is I know Alexa Bliss is very respected, from what I gather, on a women's wrestling standpoint. And for being so small, but she's extremely talented. And we're talking about, spitting on the audience, she, to the point where there was, I can't remember which pay-per-view it was, but I think, she won the, which one was it? She won the Elimination Chamber.
Yeah.
And then she got the Money in the Bank later on. And she even used it to cash in. And, she was, she would get the you deserve it chance. And she would literally, in the first, maybe 4 sentences worth of her dialogue, she would be like, thank you, this was so, blah, blah, blah. She kind of build you up and be like, oh, she's actually thanking us. And then in the next sentence, she just drops a bomb, and it's like, holy shit. Like, I thought we were best friends, and now you just kicked me in the nuts. What the hell? So, I mean, she does. I've seen her do it the last few times I watched her, and, when she's not just being an absolute bitch, she's just heel all the time. She's to the point where it's in a pay-per-view where, the only people watching it is people that got WWE Network or whatever, but, she's like, oh, thank you for saying I deserve this, but I hate you and I hope you all die.
Yeah.
So, and she does it so well.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, she's not like a big wrestler, like as far as height-wise. She's not, super bulky or anything like that. I mean, it basically, when you look at her, you're like, hey, what? She doesn't have the persona of being one of the most what's the word for it?
Powerhouse.
Well,
Like she can't even see over the third rope barely. So.
Yeah. I mean, like if you look at her height, I mean, like I said, if you look at her height, you'll see that she is not very big at all. But the one thing that she commands is she commands a presence on the mic. And that's something that was fantastic. I mean, if you look at Ric Flair, and we just shared it to the Wrestlefest page, if you look at Ric Flair, the way he talks down to everybody, the way he's like, hey, I have this Rolex, I have so many diamonds on here, I can't even see the time. It's like
can't even shine my boots. I'm so much better.
Yeah, there you go. So and that's the thing. It's like Ric Flair was just such a huge impact on doing these kind of things. Flair was famous for talking down to the audience, making sure that everybody knew that he was the best. And one of the great storylines, and this is one of my favorite storylines. Along with the Mega Powers, right? There was a storyline that he did with Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. And do you remember that one?
To be honest with you, not much of it.
Okay. Well, what wound up happening is that Ric Flair, he wanted the belt. I mean, the thing is this guy's like larger than life, Ric Flair wanted to go ahead and make sure that he was known as the best. He could have anything. And one of the things that he had in this, he was actually teaming up with Kurt Hennig during this time. This is fantastic little storyline.
Yeah.
And he had pictures of Elizabeth at his mansion. And suddenly he got the Macho Man completely riled up. And Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth, there were a lot of lines that were kind of blurred there as well, if you look at the history past and with the Mega Powers and everything, which is another great storyline. But this is kind of the great storyline of showing how a heel has an impact on a great piece. So Ric Flair was showing all these pictures saying, oh, she loves me. She loves being with me. Look at her smile. You haven't seen her smile like that. And he would go off and stir up the Macho Man, and it was constantly boom, boom, boom. And finally, when their match came, everybody was talking. Everybody was just a buzz about it. What side would Elizabeth be on? Will she be with, Ric Flair? He has all this money. Or will she be on Macho Man's corner? So it was an amazing rivalry because of the fact that this, people believed it. People knew. We had physical evidence. We had photos of Miss Elizabeth there at the house. It was just crazy. So this is what makes a great storyline. The fact that you can play on the people, the fact that the heel can generate tons of heat, the fact that people keep coming in night after night, tuning in to figure out what's going to happen next. And you see, that's where the storylines have been kind of deviating. That's where the problems have been with kayfabe going downhill. But like I said, now it's looking like it's returning back, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to pull away from the kind of like really kind of gimmicky storyline, the really kind of crazy stuff, because the whole hey, you stole my wife, or hey, you took over my kid has been done a million times over. So many times, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, but we fall for it every single time. It's like you fool me once, shame on me, but you fool me twice, shame on me again.
Well, I said the same thing when they brought Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre back together. And everybody's like, oh my God, they got these two guys back together, or not back together, but these two powerhouses, and now they're teaming up and they're like killing it and blah blah blah. But it's like you can look at pictures and they did it 10 years ago, the same two, and it didn't work the first time, and this time they kind of changes how they did it, but it's just along the same lines as like they just threw it in there.
Yeah, and so, kind of jumping into that, let's look at these guys. Okay, so we have All Elite Wrestling, right?
Oh, I can't wait for this.
This is starting the new year, and I mean, basically you had Wrestle Kingdom happen just recently. And if you haven't been following Be Elite on YouTube and stuff like that, they it's been a long time standing. These guys came from Bullet Club fame, and then suddenly started building the idea of this promotion that's going to be bringing wrestling back to where it needs to be, showing the athletic skills, all the abilities, and the quote-unquote flippy shit. So you had Wrestle Kingdom, and more evidence of kind of everything that was happening was the fact that these guys were on the way to creating something new. So they started signing contracts, they started doing everything else, and from what I heard recently, and something that's really fascinating, is that Social Uncensored, which is, and this is where we come into the indie wrestling scene, right? What the indie wrestling scene is doing more and more likely, and this is kind of falling into New Japan too, because New Japan knows that the audience is not dumb. They don't try to lie to their audience. They don't try to say, hey, this is not kayfabe. But at the same time, what they do is they go ahead and they say, this is fake, but the wrestling is real, right? The outcomes are unpredicted. So it's not that it's been settled, So and so they try to blur the two lines, which is what they're trying to do to kind of make wrestling great again. And a lot of the indie promotions have picked up on this. They're like, you know what? They know that there are aspects that are fake, and that's kind of like where strong style comes in, right? Strong style is basically and we talked about potatoing the other person, kind of just really hitting them hard. Strong style is about showing these moves up close and kind of showing these dangerous, hard-hitting moves, and they take them, and it shows and builds up of a match. I mean, some of these, wrestling matches for New Japan can last up to an hour. I mean, you can imagine the exhaustion that these wrestlers go through. I mean, if it was Mark Henry, it'd be like a 5-minute match. If it was, Big Show, but these guys build on it. And they know how to kind of give and return. I mean, it's pushing. You can't push really fast. It has to be a slow build. They start working on certain things, like, and this is something when you call, he's working an arm, or he's working the back, or he's working. They would focus in on certain body parts. Like if somebody had a hurt shoulder, they'd go ahead and go in for the hurt shoulder. They used to do this back in the day, and now it's coming back again. Or like, the famous match that Kenny Omega had just recently at Wrestle Kingdom. He was purposely trying to work on the core, of the wrestler. He was working on their back. He was working on their chest, because he didn't want to for them to have the ability to kick out of their move. And nowadays, they say that, well, you could have a wrestler that has an amazing finishing move, and they're like, oh, he hits the finishing move 20 times. Like, on an average, you see an F5 being hit like 5 times before the wrestler finally
John
kicks.
Cena.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's another part of kind of taking it away, because before, when you hit your finishing move, that was it. We can count on it being over. And that's why you had signature moves, It's like, it wasn't your finishing move, but it's your I'm damn close move. And that's the move you kick out of. But now it's like a lot of finishers lost their impact because of that. Well, what a lot of these indie wrestlers were doing, and even Kenny Omega, right? Which, me personally, okay, and everybody's going to freaking hate me for this, okay? Send all your hate mail to Rody Batman. But I personally think that Kenny Omega is not a great wrestler. I mean, he's good. I don't know. I just don't like him on the mic. He just sounds like a very kind of whiny brat. But his finishing move, the one-winged angel, nobody's ever kicked out of it. If he hits it, it's over, and he won. Nobody has kicked out of it. That gives that move legitimacy. That's what's
just
missing.
don't ever sign with WWE. They'll kick out in the first match.
Well, that's a lot of speculation. Right now, they're going through a hell of a lot of speculation, thinking that Kenny Omega is because he said he needed to take some time off. He hasn't said that he's going to sign with all Elite Wrestling, which would make sense. But at the same time, I mean, the WWE is throwing money. I mean, they are legitimately making it rain, which I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to hear anything about rain making anytime soon, just because of what happened. But I am telling you honestly, I don't think he should take it if it's not about the money, because WWE has so much control, you know.
They'll bury him.
They will. And the reason being is because I don't think WWE is at the level where NXT is at. And, you know, when they go, oh, he got the call up. When you think about them getting the call up, that means, hey, you know, this person is moving along, doing great things. This person is going to be going up to the next rung of the ladder. But nowadays in NXT, you kind of want to stay in NXT. You kind of want to continue working those throwbacks to those old gymnasiums. Throwbacks.
Well, you can be the top of the company in that, you know, in NXT. You know, you could potentially win titles in there because, you know, they actually build those characters based on, you know, their wrestling techniques, you know, exactly. and not just how well they talk, but, you know, they build them from both sides of it. You know, a lot of times you'll have somebody that is just a talker and, you know, maybe an okay wrestler, or some that are great wrestlers, but they can't talk for shit. Yeah. But, you know, I don't know necessarily that there's anybody that meets that bill in NXT. It's usually, you know, they can do both, or they're teamed up with somebody who can do one of the two.
Exactly. And, I mean, I think that's where it comes down to, you know, like the importance of what's going to happen here in the future. So, you know, hopefully All Elite's going to be amazing. Ring of Honor has done an amazing job of kind of building a lot of these things with the Cisco brothers and everything else. I mean, we're starting to see a whole new era of wrestling. I think that things are going to be changing for the better as long as they keep that legitimacy going. Now, as we start to wrap this up and kind of go I kind of wanted to touch on some of the great storylines and just... I wanted to ask you, Rody Batman, what do you think? Because I mentioned mine, though, the whole Ric Flair, Miss Elizabeth kind of back and forth there as being one of my favorites. But what has been one of your favorites?
My favorite storyline was actually early DX. It was when Sergeant Slaughter was kind of the commissioner.
Okay.
That and... just the comedic value of DX, not even so far later, you know, just, you know, DX, Degeneration X. It was the build of DX, you know, it wasn't DX. It was, we're degenerates, but we're Generation X, and we're Degeneration X. And then they go into later on, they actually have these, you know, these comedic storylines with Sergeant Slaughter and constantly being the, you know, the annoying kid in class that is constantly screwing everything up. That one time they actually wore the helmets with the little windshield wipers on their mask. That was so brilliant. I remember laughing so hard in those segments, and just to see Shawn Michaels having a good time with it, and Triple H not being the snobby Hunter Hearst Helmsley, you know, he was Triple H, you know, and watching, because to me that was the evolution of the, not to pun intended, but the evolution of those two characters for me. You know, HBK was already, you know, there, you know, yeah. But he was like right at the, you know, maybe peak of his prime. And then he's like, oh, you know, I'm a big star now. I can have some fun with it. And they did it, and it was so freaking brilliant. And then even to the extent, I mean, Degeneration X, I mean, I know they have the Horsemen. I know they have so many stables out there. But Degeneration X was it for me. I was a degenerate. You know, it was fun to watch. I mean, even on to the Monday Night Wars where they did the invasion of WCW. And that was post Shawn Michaels era, but, you know, that was the Triple H DX. But just Road Dogg was, to me, my favorite talker of all time. I mean, every time he was on the mic, until he got to the... he just kept coming back and doing his normal thing, you know, just like, you know, every time they brought him back and he had to do the same thing over and over again. But every wrestler gets into that point in their career. But, you know, one of my favorite promos was between him and The Rock. And you know, until that point, the Road Dogg could talk, but they never put him against somebody like The Rock. And, he stood toe-to-toe with The Rock on the mic. And it's like, nobody expected Road Dogg to be, like, as smooth, if not smoother, than The Rock on the mic. And it was just brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have to say one of my second favorites was when the Y2J era. Right at Y2K. I mean, the WWE did it, well, WWF at the time, but they did it brilliantly. They're like, this is a worldwide phenomenon right now.
No, and you had the countdown clock, you had everything, so, I mean, it was the most brilliant build-up for anything that I think that you could ever have.
So to think it's like, okay, who is this? It's obviously a build-up to some new character or something like that. That nobody knew. No, and that was prior to the internet era, to where
everybody
like you can't even go to the bathroom without it being put on the internet nowadays. So to think that nobody had a clue who this was,
it's when I do my best.
I'm sure there might have been a handful.
And and like I said, it goes back to like what you thought was the best era that you could possibly have, and I absolutely agree. I think that's there were some great times and great things to be had. Now, one thing that I want to go ahead and kind of toss out there. Now, remember, guys, I mean, this is Wrestlefest. We're going to be doing some amazing stuff here, and I absolutely love the fact that we're going to be able to talk more and more about wrestling as time goes on. Remember to go ahead and like our page, Chimichanga Talk, like Chimichanga Talk's Wrestlefest as well, for up and coming news. We post stuff there all the time. Not only that, but remember to go ahead and follow us on Instagram at Chimichanga Talk. Basically, all your social media stuff, you could go ahead and tweet me at Deadpool Speaks. I know that it's been a little silent over there, but we just had like a hurricane, and we had a tsunami, an earthquake, and a volcano, and there's just not
opened up.
There's not enough virgins to sacrifice anymore. So.
Don't forget though, because we're starting to. I mean, this is the first one, but along with this podcast, we're starting to build the Twitch channel. So I mean, Not only go follow all those other social networks, but remember to follow us on our Twitch channel. Hit that follow, and spread the love, share the page. Whether it be on Facebook, Twitch. We're trying to build all aspects.
Yes, exactly. And another thing that I want to kind of toss out there, and this is extremely, extremely important, is that for the what is it? Jesus, this the fifth. I think this is the fifth year in a row. We are going to be at Pensacon. Yes, Pensacon.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands. You have to go ahead and put that up there. Now, what makes this so important is not only is this an amazing, amazing year for Pensacon because of the amazing amount of guests that they're going to have.
I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite ones yet, just with everybody that's going to be there. And me being Roadie Batman being the key word, and Batman... The Batman. I don't care if you're a Michael Keaton fan. I don't care if you're a Christian Bale fan. Nipples Batman. It doesn't matter. The Batman, Kevin Conroy, is going to be at Pensacon, and that is just absolutely epic to me. So.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And for our wrestling fans out there, Diamond Dallas Page is going to be there. Hillbilly
Self-high five.
There you go. Hillbilly Jim is going to be down there. Okay, good old country boy. Not only that, but we have like Sean Gunn, brother of James Gunn, who's been in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. We're gonna have a reunion.
Hold on. For y'all with the benefit of flash photography, Christian is going to be there.
Christian's going to be there as well. Yes, exactly. And I mean, come on now, all right, Christian Cage. I mean, you have such an amazing lineup. You have like people like Orlando Jones, like tons of amazing voice actors out there. You have a friend of the show who's been on our show before, and it's just an amazing guy, Lou Temple, is going to be there.
Jeffrey Combs. Jeffrey Combs is like one of my favorite characters of all time in Star Trek because he played so many of them.
And not only that, but I mean, he was Reanimator. He was in the Frighteners.
Voiced Scarecrow.
He voiced Scarecrows. Yeah, I think I said Scarecrows.
You did, but
yeah,
it's okay.
You
it was just one.
You know, if we were by the water, I'd be completely scared of this next one. Tara Reid's going to be there.
Oh, God.
So Sharknado, and one of the
we did just have a hurricane with several tornadoes. We do not need any more sharks.
But that's okay because we got the original Hercules. Kevin Sorbo is going to be there as well. You know, we have the amazing, incomparable William Shatner.
The voice of. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that.
No. I mean, you know, it's okay. He's used to it.
I was going to talk about Pinky and the Brain, but if you're going to talk about Shatner, we can wait on Pinky and the Brain.
Well, I mean, we have a Pinky and the Brain reunion. You got Rob Paulson and Maurice LaMarche, which is amazing. You got Felix Celia, which we've met before at the Panama City Beach Comic-Con. He's he did not only like Star Wars work, he also did the Addams Family. He was Cousin It.
That's right. And who was it? He played one of the robots. I always think he's in Doctor Who, but he wasn't in Doctor Who. Was it Buck Rogers or something?
Yes. He was. Yeah. He was the little creepy looking one.
Yeah.
It was creepy. And if for all our Disney fanatics out there, you not only have you know, Paige O'Hare, Linda Larkin, Irene Bedard, which Beauty from Beauty and the Beast, you know, Jasmine from Aladdin, and Pocahontas from what's the name of that movie? Oh yeah,
Pocahontas.
Cinderella. Oh yes, of course.
Hold on, do you know who? I've just got to hit on this because I did not know this. The voice of Chip.
Oh yeah,
from Beauty and the Beast. Do you know who he was? Bradley Pierce. He was the little kid in Jumanji.
Yes.
Like, I didn't know that. I was like,
a little monkey
cow.
kid. Yeah, next to Kristen Dunst. She was. Yes. She was the snotty sister.
Yes, Judy, I think.
I think so. Maybe, I don't know. Well, I mean, leave the comments below if you have an issue with it. And from like Drunk History, Craig Kakowski. Absolutely hilarious guy. If you guys watch Drunk History, absolutely love Drunk History. He's going to be there. I mean, basically, I don't care what you do, you are never going to go out. Go ahead and pull out a loan on your house because there's so many famous people there. John
You've got an Indiana Jones reunion. Yes. You've got a Harry Potter reunion. You've got
Doctor Who. We got
Doctor
River
Who.
Song from Doctor Who there. Peter
and two
Davidson.
doctors.
Yeah.
Two separate doctors.
It is just amazing.
Nog of all people.
Oh yes,
Nog is going to be there.
And this is the thing. I know that. And also from the Adventures of Pete and Pete, right? From Nickelodeon. Yes. They're Pete and Pete reunion, which they're actually starting a tour. You know, basically. I don't know where. I think they're going to be in Orlando or something like that.
Broadway show.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like one of those Kevin Smith stuff, you know, where they go on stage and kind of do their thing of Nickelodeon. Yeah, man. So
John Rice Davies, dude. John Rice Davies.
Yes, and I mean, you remember him from Sliders,
Gimli.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously part of the Indiana Jones reunion.
Yes.
Summer Glau
from Firefly.
Take a moment. Take a moment. Pause.
Yeah.
Pause. Summer Glau is going to be there.
Breathe her in. Do it now.
Taste of the face.
You don't need to be creepy about it later. So, I mean, this is just going to be an amazing show. And you know, like I said, we're going to be there. We're going to be in Poseidon's Bay. We're going to be hanging out in the bay. We're going to be doing Karaoke-ocalypse. I know that for sure. I just don't know when. So keep in tune to our Facebook page. Please go ahead and leave your comments below. Are you excited to see us? What are you excited about Pensacon? We love Pensacon. Oh, and remember, Jimmy J.J. Walker is also going to be there. Dynamite. Get him, to say that. Bam Margera. I told you he was one of the first ones that was announced.
I'm telling you, if I get a chance, I don't know if I'll get time, but my focus is getting all the characters from Batman to sign my poster, but I want a picture of number one doing his patented Captain Morgan stance. You know how he always picks up one leg?
Yeah.
I've got to get a picture with William T. Riker with both of us in the Captain Morgan stance. I got to get that. Even if I don't get his autograph, I want that picture.
And also remember, I mean, like I said, so many greats that are coming there. It's going to be difficult to choose exactly, who you want to touch upon. I mean, not only that, but there's a lot of great artists.
Voice actors. Tons of voice actors.
Tons of voice actors. Karen Allen. Julian Glover. I mean, these are great old school actors. Paul Freeman. Like I said, we said the Indiana Jones reunion. And John Wesley Shipp again. He was at Pensacon. If you didn't meet him before, my God, the most friendliest guy ever. He was the Flash, and he actually portrays himself again in this one. So, let's go ahead and we'll end on that note, guys. It's been an amazing talk about kayfabe, and we definitely want you guys to go ahead and make sure that you like our Twitch page, like our Facebook page. You can find us wherever your social media guides take you. So, align your chakra and make sure that you hit that like button. Make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to us. We'd be more than happy to go ahead and hear from you. Like, we always love to hear from our fans. Again, with me today was the incomparable, absolutely amazing, the man with a beard, the man who wears the camouflage shirts, the man who is the Dark Knight, Rhodey Batman.
That's me.
Yeah, there you go. Jesus, dramatic effect. And I am Deadpool Speaks, and you've been listening to Chimichanga Talks Wrestlefest, one of the first, podcasts that we're going to be putting out for this year. We're hoping to come back with a lot more. Look for that. Look for, hopefully we're going to be doing some Dungeons & Dragons stuff too, man.
Heck yeah, I can't wait.
Oh, this is going to be frickin' fantastic. So remember to like all our stuff. Guys, I am Deadpool Speaks. That was Rhodey Batman. You've been listening to Chimichanga Talk, and we are...
Out.
There you go.